Welcome to Histories Hall, where we bring you the most captivating stories from the past, the tales of power, betrayal, and forgotten heroes that shaped our world. Today, we're diving into one of ancient history's most overlooked figures, a woman who defied an empire, commanded armies, and nearly changed the course of history. Let's begin. They say history is written by the victors. But sometimes, the victors are so thorough in erasing their enemies that entire lives disappear into shadow. This is the story of a woman who should have been a footnote, a younger sister, an inconvenience, a rival disposed of and forgotten. Instead, she became a queen, a military commander, and one of the greatest threats Cleopatra VII ever faced. Her name was Arsinoe IV. And this is the story of how Cleopatra's little sister nearly changed the course of history. Picture Alexandria in its glory. The great lighthouse piercing the sky. Ships from every corner of the known world crowding the harbor. The royal palace, dripping with wealth that would make emperors jealous. And inside that palace, a family slowly tearing itself apart. Arsinoe was born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, the Greek rulers of Egypt who'd held power since Alexander the Great's general claimed the throne 3 centuries earlier. But by the time of her birth, the dynasty was collapsing under the weight of its own corruption, incest, and betrayal. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was called Alex, the flute player. Not exactly a fearsome title for a pharaoh. He was weak, incompetent, and so desperate to hold on to power that he bankrupted Egypt paying bribes to Rome. Her mother's identity remains uncertain, possibly a concubine, possibly a minor wife. What we do know is that Arsinoe had 3 siblings who mattered, an older sister named Cleopatra, and 2 younger brothers, both named Ptolemy, because apparently the family lacked imagination as much as they lacked stability. Growing up in the Ptolemaic court meant watching your back. Always. Ptolemaic siblings didn't compete for their parents' affection, they competed for survival. Murder was a family tradition. Mothers poisoned sons. Brothers married sisters and then killed them. Children overthrew parents. This wasn't a dynasty, it was a multi-generational bloodbath with crowns. And young Arsinoe was learning the rules of this deadly game. When Ptolemy XII died in 51 BCE, he left the throne to his 2 eldest children, 18-year-old Cleopatra VII and 10-year-old Ptolemy XIII. In Ptolemaic tradition, they were married to each other. Because nothing says stable government like forcing teenagers into incestuous political marriages. But Cleopatra had no intention of sharing power with a child brother. She was brilliant, charismatic, fluent in 9 languages, and ambitious in ways that terrified the men around her. Within 2 years, she'd marginalized Ptolemy XIII completely, ruling Egypt as sole pharaoh. The boy king's advisors weren't having it. Led by a eunuch named Pothinus and a general named Achilles, they staged a coup in 48 BCE, driving Cleopatra into exile. Where was Arsinoe during all this? Watching. Learning. Waiting. Because everything was about to change. 48 BCE. The Roman Republic is tearing itself apart in civil war. Pompey the Great, fleeing from Julius Caesar after a catastrophic defeat, makes the mistake of seeking refuge in Egypt. Ptolemy XIII's advisors, hoping to curry favor with Caesar, murder Pompey the moment he steps ashore and present his severed head as a gift when Caesar arrives days later. Caesar is horrified. Whatever Pompey had been, rival, enemy, threat, he was also a Roman consul and Caesar's former son-in-law. The murder is an insult to Rome itself. Caesar occupies Alexandria, installs himself in the royal palace, and summons both Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII to settle their dispute. What happens next is legendary. Cleopatra has herself smuggled into the palace rolled up in a carpet, dramatically unrolling at Caesar's feet. The 52-year-old general is enchanted by the 21-year-old queen. Caesar declares that Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII will rule jointly, as their father intended. But he's clearly Team Cleopatra all the way. Arsinoe, now about 20 years old, sees the pieces on the board clearly. Cleopatra has seduced Rome's most powerful man. Ptolemy XIII is a puppet controlled by advisors. And Arsinoe? She's been invisible long enough. It's time to make her move. Ptolemy XIII's advisors are livid. Their boy king is being sidelined, Cleopatra is back in power, and now there's a Roman general occupying their palace, making demands. In November 48 BCE, they launch a full-scale assault on Caesar's forces. And this is where Arsinoe's story truly begins. She escapes the royal palace and joins the Egyptian forces besieging Caesar. But she doesn't come as a princess seeking protection. She comes as a leader. And in an extraordinary move, the Egyptian army proclaims her Queen of Egypt, Pharaoh Arsinoe IV. Let that sink in. A 20-year-old woman, with no military experience, convinces hardened soldiers and cynical generals to make her their queen in the middle of a war. She wasn't the oldest child. She wasn't the preferred heir. But she had something her siblings lacked: courage, charisma, and perfect timing. General Achilles becomes her military commander, but Arsinoe quickly proves she's no figurehead. When Achilles begins making decisions without consulting her, she has him executed and replaces him with her tutor, Ganymedes. Yes, you heard that right. Arsinoe's first major act as queen is executing her own general for insubordination. She's not playing games. She's playing to win. Under Ganymedes' command, the Egyptian forces nearly succeed in defeating Caesar. They cut off his water supply by sabotaging the palace's freshwater systems. They launch naval attacks that destroy parts of Caesar's fleet. They set fire to warehouses, and in the chaos, flames spread to the Great Library of Alexandria, destroying irreplaceable knowledge. For months, Julius Caesar, the greatest military mind of his generation, the man who conquered Gaul and crossed the Rubicon, is pinned down in Alexandria by Egyptian forces led by a woman barely out of her teens. But war is fickle, and fortune more so. In early 47 BCE, Roman reinforcements arrive. Ptolemy XIII, who'd briefly reconciled with the Egyptian forces, drowns while fleeing a lost battle, his body dragged down by his golden armor. With the boy king dead and Caesar's reinforcements overwhelming, the rebellion collapses. Arsinoe is captured. Think about what she must have felt in that moment. She'd been queen. She'd commanded armies. She'd fought the most powerful man in the world to a standstill. And now she was a prisoner, her fate in the hands of the sister who'd never tolerated rivals. Caesar, magnanimous in victory, spares her life. But there's a price. 46 BCE. Rome. A triumph is the highest honor Rome can bestow on a victorious general. A parade through the streets of the capital, showcasing conquered treasures and defeated enemies. Caesar celebrates 4 triumphs in succession, for his victories in Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. And in the Egyptian triumph, walking in chains before the cheering Roman mob, is Arsinoe IV, Queen of Egypt. Imagine her humiliation. Imagine the strength it took to walk through those streets, to endure the jeers and mockery, to be displayed like a trophy. Roman triumphs traditionally ended with the execution of the most prominent captives. Arsinoe walks through Rome knowing she might die at the end of that parade. But something extraordinary happens. The Roman crowd, seeing this young woman, a queen reduced to prisoner, walking with dignity despite her chains, begins to pity her. The cheers turn to murmurs. Some sources suggest there were even protests. The Romans, who'd seen countless kings and generals paraded to their deaths, are moved by Arsinoe's courage. Caesar, perhaps sensing the shift in public opinion, or perhaps genuinely moved himself, makes an unprecedented decision. He spares her life. no execution. Instead, he exiles her to the temple of Artemis at Ephesus, in modern-day Turkey, where she can live under the protection of sanctuary laws. Arsinoe is 22 years old. She's been a queen, a military commander, and now she's a prisoner set free. She should be grateful to be alive. But Cleopatra never forgets. And Cleopatra never forgives. For the next decade, Arsinoe lives in Ephesus. We know frustratingly little about these years. Did she plot? Did she dream of return? Did she try to build support among the enemies of Rome and Egypt? What we do know is that her very existence was a problem for Cleopatra. By now, Cleopatra is the undisputed queen of Egypt, mother to Caesar's son Caesarion, and after Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, she's become the lover and political partner of Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful men. But Arsinoe is still out there. Still alive. Still legitimate. Still a Ptolemaic princess who could, theoretically, be used by Cleopatra's enemies to challenge her rule. In the dangerous game of Ptolemaic politics, loose ends don't stay loose for long. The sources are sparse and contradictory, but the outcome is clear. In 41 BCE, at Cleopatra's request, Mark Antony orders the murder of Arsinoe IV. Soldiers arrive at the temple of Artemis. They drag her from sanctuary, a shocking violation of sacred law that would have outraged the ancient world. And then they kill her. Arsinoe is approximately 28 years old. Cleopatra has finally eliminated the last threat to her throne. The sister who'd defied her, who'd claimed Egypt as her own, who'd fought Rome itself, is silenced forever. But here's what's haunting. We don't know exactly how Arsinoe died. We don't know her last words. We don't know if she fought or pleaded or walked to her death with the same dignity she'd shown walking in chains through Rome. What we do know is that she was buried in Ephesus, in an octagonal tomb that archaeologists believe they've identified. Recent forensic analysis of remains from that tomb suggests they belong to a woman of royal status who died violently in her 20s. Even in death, Arsinoe remains partially in shadow. Here's what makes Arsinoe IV extraordinary: she wasn't supposed to matter. In the grand narrative of ancient history, she's barely a footnote. Cleopatra is the famous sister, the seductress, the queen, the icon. Arsinoe is the forgotten one, the inconvenient sibling who briefly interfered and was eliminated. But look closer at what she actually accomplished. At 20, with no military training, she convinced an army to make her queen. She commanded forces that nearly defeated Julius Caesar, in battle. She survived being paraded through Rome in chains and won the sympathy of a crowd that had watched countless captives die. She lived in exile for a decade as a permanent threat to the most powerful woman in the Mediterranean. Arsinoe didn't win. But she didn't fade quietly, either. She represents something Cleopatra's legend often obscures: Ptolemaic women weren't passive victims or mere seductresses. They were players in a brutal game of power, capable of military command, political maneuvering, and ruthless ambition. And perhaps that's exactly why history forgot her. Arsinoe's story doesn't fit the narrative we want about powerful ancient women. She wasn't a tragic victim. She wasn't a romantic figure. She was a woman who seized power, fought for it, lost it, and was murdered for the crime of existing as a rival. That's not a comfortable story. But it's a true one. 4 years after Arsinoe's murder, Cleopatra would stand at Actium as Antony's fleet faced Octavian's navy. After their defeat, she would retreat to Alexandria, and in 30 BCE, she would die, possibly by suicide, possibly by murder, the truth lost to time and legend. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic dynasty ended after 3 centuries of rule. Egypt became a Roman province. The family that had killed and betrayed and schemed for generations was finally, completely extinct. But somewhere in Ephesus, in an octagonal tomb, lies a woman who almost changed that ending. A woman who, for one brilliant moment, was queen. A woman whose name was Arsinoe IV. And now you know her story. If you enjoyed diving into this forgotten corner of history, please hit that like button and subscribe to Histories Hall for more incredible stories from the past. We've got so much more to explore together. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.